What are melodic Ciacconna's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First things first, she is going to be an amazing Phoebe teammate. This is because she's able to apply Spectro Frazzle from off-field, which is going to make the Acolyte a whole lot more comfortable to play. And might I add, it's going to make her feel a whole lot better in Whimpering Wastes, because this fun little bard is able to apply Spectro Frazzle in multi-wave. That's right, you're able to consistently have it applied from off-field without even having to swap back into her. Previously, while you could make Phoebe work in Whimpering Wastes, it was far from ideal. You'd have to consistently swap back into Spectro Rover to continuously keep applying Spectro Frazzle to brand new enemy waves. Wuthering waves, even. Now, of course, Zani and Phoebe feel absolutely excellent in Whimpering Wastes, but what if you're an Absolution Phoebe fan? You want to make her DPS mode good in Whimpering? Well then look no further than Ciaccona, because she is 100% going to fill your needs in that regard. We've also had to deal with using Spectro Rover as Phoebe's Spectro Frazzle applicant for quite some time now, and it's gonna be really nice to get an upgrade in terms of gameplay feel. I mean shoot, adding Ciaccona to your account is going to make your Phoebe team building feel a whole lot more flexible in general, because you can stick pretty much anyone on the end. Mortefi, Sanhua, Yang Yang, Verena, Shorekeeper, or shoot, if you want to use Spectro Rover anyway, you freaking can, because there's Spectro Res Reduction in his kit after all. With Ciaccona's introduction into the game, Phoebe is officially going to be the Wuthering Waves DPS with the most variety when it comes to team options, and I think that's pretty neat. So if you are as devoted to the Acolyte as she is to the Sentinel Imperator, then you may want to look into getting this silly bard. Because even consider this. As it currently stands, DPS Phoebe is amazing in both TOA and hologram content, and if you play her as a support, then she can even extend herself to Whimpering Wastes as a great Zani teammate. However, if you want to focus on her DPS form specifically, then Ciaccona is going to make her amazing in wuwa, thus making her excellent in all of the endgame content that we currently have right now. I mean shoot, I already thought the Acolyte was quite the all-rounder of a character, but it seems like Phoebe's long list of pros just never ceases to expand. Also, while you can indeed still use Spectro Rover in her teams, and it's understandable as to why you'd want to do that considering his good personal damage and Spectro Res Reduction, I would still like to take a moment to place some special emphasis on the fact that he's being freed up by Ciaccona. I consider this to be very relevant considering how contested of a character he is these days, and as we get more and more Rover elements, he's only going to continue getting spread thinner and thinner across all teams that you're able to slot him into. So by pulling for a character like Ciaccona who's able to ease the burden a little bit, it makes your life easier when it comes to team building, and considering how Havoc Rover is quite strong, and how Aero Rover hasn't had his full potential tapped into yet, it's nice not having him completely glued to one team archetype. So on the whole, I'd say that makes Ciaccona a great character when it comes to your vigor management in the TOA. Ciaccona is also going to be an absolutely incredible investment into the Aero Erosion archetype. Now, we haven't exactly got any main DPSs that really take advantage of this yet, but going into the future, it's very likely that we may eventually see a character that does indeed want to use Aero Erosion. We all know that we're currently living through the age of negative statuses and Wuthering Waves right now. And seeing as the Spectro Frazzle archetype is pretty much wrapped up at this point, it makes sense that Kuro is going to want to move on to other negative statuses. So looking at Ciaccona's release, it only makes sense that Aero Erosion is the next on the chopping block, especially whenever you consider that Aero Rover was also given out for free recently. If you don't want her to apply Spectro Frazzle, you can instead opt for her to apply Erosion instead, which means that she is most definitely being released ahead of her time. It's very likely that if you want any future Aero Erosion DPSs to be at their absolute top in terms of potential, you might want to consider throwing a couple of Astrides at Ciaccona's banner. I mean shoot, if it wasn't obvious enough already, take a look at her freaking outro skill. It amplifies Aero Erosion damage dealt to nearby enemies by 100%. That's nothing to scoff at, so it's pretty clear that she is going to be the premier support for this archetype. Now I would like to add, Wuthering Waves does tend to rerun characters next to their best DPSs pretty frequently. That's generally how they do things, so there's no immediate FOMO to pick her up. Another thing that I'd like to point out in regards to Ciaccona's Aero Erosion supportive capabilities is the fact that she's able to provide up to 24% aero damage bonus through her basic attacks. That's pretty nice. And the thing is, that's not only good for Aero Erosion characters, that's actually good for Aero DPSs in general. For example, Jihan. Now, do I think that she's going to be replacing Mortefi for him? No, probably not. But it is cool that is another option that you're able to use if it's something that you're interested in. Gives the guy more team options after all. And when you consider things such as vigor management, that is actually relevant. Also, let's be honest with ourselves. I'm sure that we're all tired of all Wuthering Waves characters really wanting their signature weapons. However, Ciaccona, she's actually different, since she isn't necessarily going to really need it. Now, is it going to be good for her? Obviously, it's her dedicated signature weapon, I expect it to be strong, but I'd actually like to direct your attention over to Static Mist, a gun that can provide supportive capabilities. That's right, at least at rank 1, Ciaccona's going to be able to provide the incoming resonator of 10% attack when she uses her outro skill, and I think that's pretty neat. It's good buffing for her synergy such as Phoebe, and is very cost effective, since it means that you're able to invest more into say your DPS weapons instead, as opposed to pouring more astrites into trying to get Ciaccona's gun. Another thing that I'd like to point out is that damage is not really the main reason that you're using Ciaccona. You're using her to support your on-field characters, and on launch, that's going to be either Phoebe or Gion. What I'm trying to get across right now is that you don't really need to focus on Ciaccona's personal damage. It's not really the main meat of her kit. Therefore, it ends up being pretty redundant to pull for a signature weapon when you can just go for Static Mist instead and save yourself a whole lot of astrites. In fact, if you're looking to invest more astrites into your Ciaccona, I would actually advise looking at her sequence nodes. They're already in the game through the Crossing Stars menu. I mean, shoot, look at her S2. She already can provide 24% aero bonus at base, but with this, that is a neat and tidy 40% more. Alas, as lovable as our melodic bard is, there are a couple of flaws to discuss in regards to her. First of all, she's not really going to do much for Zani, I feel. Now, obviously we'll have to wait and see on that, but here's the thing. I don't think there's any justifiable reason as to why you would rather run Ciaccona over running Shorekeeper in her final slot. And if it's an issue of vigor management, then you'd rather use another healer who can buff in place of Shorekeeper. For instance, Verena or Baichi. There's nothing in Ciaccona's kit that particularly stands out as a big help to Zani, and the thing is, she's already good in Whimpering Wastes. The character that you should really be gunning after if you're a big Zani simp is Phoebe. It all comes back to the Acolyte, doesn't it? It is ridiculous how many teams this character has. But you get the idea. It's not like she's going to be doing much for Zani, which I think is a shame, since she is a character that can work with Spectro Frazzle, but she really is more for the Phoebe enjoyers here. Now that's not to say that I cannot see any potential for them working together. After all, hypothetically, let's say you just don't really want the Acolyte, then you can in fact most likely play Ciaccona in place of Phoebe, and it will most likely work fine. However, I'd like to point out how the devout follower of the Sentinel does a whole lot more than just apply Spectro Frazzle, like she has a lot of amplification in her kit, so sure, on paper, you're indeed going to be able to use them together and it'll work just fine. But certainly don't expect it to be anything too extraordinary, especially when compared to Phoebe, a character who was just born to be a Spectro Frazzle support. This next quote-unquote con I wouldn't really consider to be some major negative drawback, but she's slightly niche. You're mostly getting her if you really care about Phoebe Absolution, and if not that, then you're investing into Aero Erosion in the future. She's not a character that's going to work with literally every team under the sun, as she's mostly going to be for those two team archetypes. And it's not really a case like Phoebe, where you're able to utilize her as either a main DPS or a support, and have her do either of those jobs very well. Now, of course, Ciaccona's gonna have some amazing use cases on launch, especially for all of you Absolution Acolyte enjoyers out there, but I did also feel like it was worth pointing out how she is going to be very specifically an Aero Erosion and Spectro Frazzle support. And to be honest, she's leaning more on the side of Aero Erosion, but her application of Frazzle just so happens to have an excellent degree of synergy with Phoebe. I'd say this isn't a total drawback, since it means that you're able to easily skip her if you're not really interested in the archetype, and that's not a bad thing at the end of the day. You don't have to pull for literally every character under the sun, but it is worth pointing out. This unit does feature a crud ton of future potential, but I really hate selling future potential as some really big thing that you should pull over, because in Wuthering Waves, reruns are just scheduled in a way where you don't really have to worry about all of that stuff. I will say the future for Ciaccona is very, very clear. It is super obvious that she is going to be working with Aero Erosion. I know what I sure as heck am pulling since I am interested in that archetype, and it's actually the negative status that I'm looking forward to the most. But either way, be cautious when you pull, and keep in mind that she is pretty niche to those archetypes. I personally would only get her on launch if you're either really confident that you want to invest in that archetype, or if you're a big Phoebe fan that seriously wants to improve her Whimpering Wastes performance. I have to say though, Phoebe mains are seriously winning here. And while the prospect of the Gion synergy does sound fun, we'll have to actually wait until she comes out to see if it's actually relevant or not. All in all, I think Ciaccona's kit does look really cool. I'm pretty happy with what seems to be in the game so far. It looks like she's really going to be shilling Erosion, and as somebody who's personally interested in the archetype, I think that's pretty cool. Also, let's just be entirely honest with ourselves. Her animations are an absolute banger. They look so good, dude. I really like the ultimate. The ultimate is just perfect. So there's a lot to love here. She does really feel like a future investment for anybody that isn't an Absolution Phoebe main. And she doesn't have any DPSing mode, so we're just gonna have to wait to see what Aero Erosion DPS follows shortly after. She's releasing a little ahead of her time, so I'm glad they did give her that Spectro Frazzle synergy so that she's still going to have a team to play in whenever she first comes out. But I imagine that whenever we get our first dedicated 5-star Aero Erosion character, they are going to be utterly busted when paired with Ciaccona. But honestly, either way, I just need the character because she's a silly bard, man. But what about yourself? What do you think of Ciaccona? Are you gonna be getting her? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week, every week on Saturday, start off around 3 PM UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Ciaccona's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And you know what? Screw meta synergies, man. We need her because she can sing and dance during her ult, and that is peak.